Welcome to Marketeers Clubhouse. I'm Jamie Kalon. Today I'm on location for a special episode. There's a long-standing tradition of science fiction influencing consumer products. What would happen if that script was flipped and a brand created a special narrative that gave them all of the freedom to produce whatever they want and send the marketplace in any direction? We're going to find out today on Marketeers Clubhouse on location at Oakley. Before we delve into my conversation with Brian Takumi, the VP of Brand, Soul, and Creative at Oakley, I want you all to see and listen to the two foundational pieces of video that are coming up. They're Max Fearlight and Oakley 1242. These were built in 1992 by Jim Gennard at Oakley. They were created in a TV commercial style format, but ended up serving as Oakley's North Star for many years. They established the brand's tone, positioning, and aesthetic. They guided every decision in product and design. What ended up happening is naturally this focused the entire company on this strange fictional future that Oakley had developed. This left the marketplace competition completely baffled. How could any brand come into Oakley's world and even possibly dream of competing? It was rules set and made by Oakley. It was impossible. This is what made Oakley the iconic brand of the time and the one that we know and love.
Session 1242.
Observe the night. Let it cleanse you of unconventional thought. Let its brilliance purify your mind of deviant concepts and rebellious ideas. Resist, surrender to the irresistible force of oneness, and accept the wisdom of the past life. Never.
You were in my clubhouse last time, and today we're in yours, and it is glorious. And you made a bunch of changes here, which is really cool. And welcome everybody. We're at the headquarters of Oakley in beautiful Southern California, which we're getting a little more rain light, which is nice. I like it. We just showed everybody a clip of the original Max Fearlight video. And you guys are going through a rebirth of a brand narrative. Start me at the zero. This is something you guys have been working on for 4 or 5 years, right?
Yep, quite a while.
Brian, run me through, let's just start with the section we're sitting in. It's glorious, it's beautiful, it's way nicer, in my opinion, than what it was before. And when I was a young man, it floored me. And when I walked in today, it was like breathtaking. What have you guys done? Why have you done it? And you're changing structure from a brand level. So let's go.
Yeah. Welcome having you here. It's been a while since you've been in this building. I know we've been on a podcast, but welcome to the evolution of Oakley. And I think, just as you mentioned, it's an evolution of Oakley. It's not changing who we are. It's not running away from our past, but it's actually taking a step forward and building upon that foundation. I mean, we did Secret Recipe with you on a previous broadcast. And I think where we are now is how do we take the brand forward? Keeping that secret recipe still the same and building off that foundation, but move us forward in what do we mean for the future. And Future Genesis was the first step in that. And I think the obvious choice to evolve it was to start within the lobby. And I think when you know the history of the brand, you've been here tons before, the lobby is beautiful, but it was very dark, very dystopian, very much as it was a bunker. You remember coming here, there wasn't even a front window. It was literally a concrete wall at the front there, and the doors were on the side and spikes on the building, and people literally didn't know how to get into this place.
Yeah.
Very much if you know, you know. And so as we talked about the world evolving, the generations evolving, the next generation of audience, and as these kids are discovering Y2K and the old Oakley, instead of us being like secretive and that if you know, you know, and very mysterious, we were like, let's welcome people into the brand. And the first thing in redoing the lobby as you walked up to is you probably noticed that the door's in the front now.
Yeah, it's right in the front. It's easy to find how to get in now.
And that was very symbolic to evolving the brand of like, how do we make this place? We keep the architecture the same. We have this big bunker facility here. Let's go from it being a bunker of survival to actually a bunker as an event space to welcome people in, where even doing this podcast, you know, in the past, Oakley would say like, oh, we're going to produce this, we're going to do it in studio, tell the whole story, versus like, even with this, like, let's open up the lobby and do the podcast live in here.
Yeah, that's great.
And keep it open, then be the Oakley of the past, where we're like, people will find out later on what the secrets are.
Yeah, it's an interesting switch, because it's actively so much more inclusive. Like, there's so many neat things. I feel, and I know I haven't been able to tour everything, I feel there's some pretty good locked rooms still in this facility where lots of really cool things are being worked on. And so, you know, don't think that you can come in as a consumer and just start, you know, strolling through design, because there's a lot of really cool secret stuff happening in the building. But the brand itself and its messaging is becoming more inclusive, which is really interesting. And if you haven't had a chance as a viewer to go and look at the release of the Future Genesis stuff, I think we already mentioned it, but I'm going to go back. The original Max Fearlight stuff was in 1992. And it was the start of you guys being able to unshackle the design team and start creating the craziest stuff. We're surrounded in the lobby by it. I see Shoe One, I see X Metal, I see stuff that I've never seen before, which is unbelievable. All of this came from that original. It came from the inspiration of that. And I referenced in my opening that there's a lot of brands, in fact, almost all brands, look into sci-fi and try to figure out how they can move their product forward based off the vision of someone else. And, you know, these very articulate storytellers that produce movies and write books and all this stuff. And that's obvious and we see these things, whether it's happenstance or not. Motorola coming out with the StarTAC phone that was almost identical to the Star Trek communicator, and on robots in our real life, robots in this building. We have robot vacuums. We've almost got flying cars. Like, the world is changing, and this has all been predicted. You guys are changing the way, and you're going back to how this is, which is so unique for a brand. And to me, this is how to build a brand 101. And it's a master class in it. So if you're building a brand, listen up on how to do it. And you don't necessarily, Oakley, like it always done, goes to the real far extreme to go through this process. It's a 4-year, highly involved thing. So how do you even start that process?
Well, and I think, you know, the first thing, as we talked about secret recipe before, we had to be clear about who we are and what we stand for. And then I think as we went through it, we've gone through, you've been a partner of the brand forever, and it's like every new leader's like, we want a new brand positioning tool, and what's your vision, mission, purpose, and all these things. And super interesting thing, we finally got secret recipe done, which is like, what are the drivers of make Oakley Oakley? And then we got into what's the next step of that to bring it to life. And, you know, the challenge that came to me, you know, you're aware we're part of a bigger organization now, parent company and things like that. We work in a matrix organization. Even within Oakley, it's very matrix. So It didn't start out. That's why this didn't start out with like, let's make a campaign and futuristic campaign and things like that. The challenge that actually came from our CEO and our boss in Milan was, okay, Brian, how are you going to align a brand that's in a matrix organization where there's 250,000 people and at any one time 6,000 people are touching the brand, and how are you going to align them? And we talked about this and joked about it, like vision, mission, purposes, they're great and all that, and you get your one pager. But we also said, like, how do you give it context to understand that this sounds like Oakley or doesn't sound like Oakley, or how does it fit into that story? So in revisiting Max Fearlight, it was super interesting to look back to the history and go, the brand basically came together like a movie. When you look at that Max Fearlight piece and then you look at the comms or the products we were making at the time, or the way the photography was done in comms or the tone of voice, it all felt like it was part of the same movie.
Yeah.
And so when we looked at Future Genesis, we were like, okay, this is great and all. And I think now we all see the difference between reboots of just remaking an old movie or actually continuing the story that went on. And for us as Oakley, we were like, we can reboot 1242 and we'll just highlight it with new things. But to really create the longevity of the brand, when that door closes in Max Fearlight, what actually happens after that door closed and what happened in his life? And so that's where Future Genesis started coming together of like, let's actually write the story of what actually did happen to Max in his life. That actually starts to build out the next 50 years of Oakley. 2025 is going to be the 50-year anniversary of Oakley. And we said, let's actually write the next 50 years of Oakley versus just redoing the last 50 years of Oakley. And so this is what spawned Future Genesis of like, now let's actually put it in the context of movie making. When you talk about like, oh, who are your athletes? Who are your influencers? Like, they're basically casts of your movie. And then you talk about like set design or look at environmental design of this building. Does it feel like it fits the set of what our movie would be about? Right. Does the prop design, do the products we make should actually be the prop design of like, do these products actually feel like they would be props in our movie? So really it just became an alignment tool to think about, when someone's executing in comms, or whether it's an environmental design and spaces, or whether it's actually product, that's how you go, does this feel like it's Oakley? If you can't remember secret recipe, you can't remember vision, mission, purpose, just ask yourself, does this table feel like it belongs in the movie or not?
Fair enough.
Transform your trade marketing with Regulator, where trade marketing precision meets sales tool performance. Regulator ensures every marketing dollar is spent wisely, keeps your team aligned with defined user governance. Whether you're managing local campaigns or global initiatives, Regulator keeps your marketing efforts streamlined and effective in the real world. Give us 15 minutes to show you how we will save you time and money. Go to brandregulator.com.
It's confusing to a lot of people without understanding the full backstory of it, which is really interesting. And just to rewind things a tiny bit, in the video that we just showed, Max Fearlight is the main character, and it's also part of Jim's original vision of a time of day where there's like maximum fear light, where the radiation of the sun in this dystopian setting is so much that it's obviously so dangerous to be outside. And I really find this interesting because it's, one, sooner or later it's going to happen to us. Our star, which we call the sun, is at any given point multiple sun flares away from creating a ton of mayhem for us. In fact, in the news very recently, today there was an insane amount of flares, and it's causing northern lights everywhere. Not just in the north. There's going to be this magnetic resonance of northern lights all over the place. And so these aren't really things that can possibly be so far away. These are like, we are talking a few degrees off of the sun burning slightly different, and we're in Max Fearlight. Which is, I know, one of, like, Oakley is built around art, but also an incredible amount of function and protection. And for anyone who doesn't know, best protection that you need to do for your eyes, you can't rub sunscreen on them. You got to wear proper eyewear. Lots of eyewear can have UV coatings and all these different things. Oakley's is super unique, and it's far superior in a lot of ways to a lot of product out there. So knowing that that's part and built into the product, built in. It's just good for humanity, even in our state now. Max Fearlight, the original one, got you guys going down this direction where, you know, so many years later, you're like, we need to extend Max's story. We need to really move this forward to realign the brand on a global level. You're undoubtedly a much larger company now, a more complex company, a company with a parent company, and you got all these expectations and stuff that you need to do. I laughed when you started knocking mission statements, because I laugh at them all the time. If anyone's never seen a brand book, in a lot of instances, there'll be a page where they're like, our mission statement is we want to be kind and we want to be good to the environment and we want to be honest. And these are like really great things, but also in many, many ways kind of bullshitty. Like they're in there just to sort of say, we want to be good people. Having a brand narrative is a way deeper thing. And the coolest part about it is it directly affects the product that the consumer is going to see. And you brought it up earlier. Instead of what most brands do is look backwards at the last product. So you stumble in, a company builds something, they stumble into a great design, they market it well, and they get a commercial success. They then look back at that and go, how can we iterate on that product? And then you end up iterating basically backwards on these products, looking backwards against the economy of the sale of the product and that commercialization. The new stuff in Future Genesis removes this. And it unshackles you guys from what has commercially worked in the past and allows you to launch the craziest stuff known to man, which I'm again, I can look around the lobby and see some stuff that I have not seen before. How purposeful is it to unshackle design, to give yourself the freedom to pick different ambassadors, different approaches to the marketplace? Like this isn't just a marketing thing. This is a whole thing.
Yeah, and I think when you look back, you know, referencing some of the secret recipe things, and as you talk about it, you know, the couple ones that come into mind are, if you always do what you always done, you always get what you always got. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, any of us can appreciate in any organization when you see like, oh, the black this is the number one seller, and someone's going to make a decision or someone's going to make a suggestion that, well, we should just keep doing this because it's our number one seller.
Yeah.
The problem with that is you will never progress that from being your number one seller if you don't come up with something new. And eventually you're going to hit a time where that's no one's best seller anymore, and you're stuck still there holding the bag of that versus continually trying to evolve yourself. And then you get into the conversation, well, how do you evolve yourself? And I think that's when you look at some of these things in the lobby. The other creed from, you know, Secret Recipe is design for the future, deliver to the present.
Right.
And that's really the meaningful one of how do you look forward and go create a vision of what we want the brand to be, what we want the products to be, who we want our partners to be, versus here's what's already working out there, so just keep doing more of that. The best example I always give to this when people say, oh, we should make one like this person, or this is already working, so make one like this. You know, the one I always reference is Over the Top, which if you don't know what Over the Top is, go look it up.
Yeah, flash to it on there on the screen right now.
The crazy glass that goes over the top of your head. And I ask people like, what brand's glass do you think was the inspiration for Over the Top? And people stare at me blankly and go, I don't know, I can't think of anyone else who was doing anything like that. And it's like,
bingo.
That's the perfect example of having a vision of what you want something to be.
Yeah.
Versus going, let's see what everyone else is doing in disruptive eyewear and let's do something like that. It was like, let's reimagine what a piece of eyewear is and how it works. We come up with Over the Top, and then, you know, do you know how many we sold? I always ask this question to people.
My gut tells me it was probably 4,000 or 5,000.
30,000.
Okay, that's way higher than I would have considered.
And people, like, I hear answers that are like 30, 40, and it's like, how many of those things got out there? And through the course of it, we sold 30,000 of those things. And how much do people, you know, 24, 25 years later since Over the Top, how much that thing is showing up in fashion and pop culture now?
Straight iconic. Yeah.
A testament to when we did something that was completely different, how much it's recognized 25 years later, versus if we had made something that looked like everyone else's, no one would recognize any of this stuff.
Yeah, it undoubtedly it's bold, and it was like even just the setup to get to that was a super bold thing. When we start talking about the new stuff that's coming out, I get super excited because this is the area of Oakley I love. Brands ebb and flow between super creative and money spent in brand and commercialization. It's the natural flow of brands. Everything sort of does this, and economies get built, and the commercialization leads to an area of higher economy that allows you then to begin to be creative again. And you got to start that process 4 years ago, which was amazing. Your design team, I'm sure, started to look at this, and I've walked around the building and I've even heard it sort of, some people get it, some people don't get Future Genesis, and they're like, I don't get it. And it's like, I feel that not everyone has to get it. In fact, you shouldn't. Not everyone should get it. And I feel that everyone within Oakley and the consumer base, the retailers, they should look at it and be like, where do I fit in with this? And it's a challenging question when they look at something this is actually aggressively creative. And so the different department leads in the company, some will be confused for a bit. The marketplace might look at this and be like, Oakley's lost their marbles. They're making movies. But I feel that that's probably the best positioning to be. And it was referenced at lunch. Rick Rubin said in an interview that if everyone likes a song you make, you didn't do your job right. You want about 50% of the people to like almost hate it with venom. Because it's better to be a polarizing thing to then not be a polarizing thing. And what you guys are doing is putting you back definitely into the position of being able to be polarizing in the marketplace. When it comes to that, you're the incumbent eyewear company globally in the world of sports. Your athletes are going to be super excited because they're going to be not only traditionally the best performers, but they're going to have this next level of marketing that gets the layer on top of them. They get to be part of Future Genesis. Have you guys, like the interaction with this and something as simple as sports marketing, which you guys are, you guys, Red Bull, there's a few people that are really, the leaders in this world. The integration with that, and I'm assuming the athletes are excited.
They are.
And is there a ton of pull from that community to bring the crazy back?
Yeah, there's a ton because, you go back to, we joke about it too, there's a blank space of 10 years past of Oakley was kind of floating around, and then, fortunately, whether it's trends coming around or just, the storytelling of the next generation, people are looking for Oakley to recapture that spirit of not just frog skins and a ubiquitous piece, but those distinctive looks and things like that. And so we heard a lot of, where athletes used to be like, I just want an O-frame, or a frog skin, which are probably some of the most ubiquitous styles we've ever had. Yeah. We're starting to go, hey, I want eye jacket, or do you have X metals or things like that? Things that were significantly embrace the DNA that, from Secret Recipe 2, that Jim embraced as like, these are the things that I see as Oakley, not razor blades, frog skins, and all that stuff. Then he's like, and he would say this too, he's like, I didn't know any better back then. The things you saw of like X metal, eye jacket, the things of the 90s and the brand coming to life is really when he started to embrace, this is the DNA that I always wanted it to be. And so when you see the athletes starting to come to that, they were super excited as we started to roll out Future Genesis and really got into like, man, I want to be part of this story. And you see the teasers and what we're going to share in the next chapter 1 of it that's coming out, that just released and is coming out. The athletes were like, it's heavily CGI. And one of the things we did at our athlete summit was to actually make characters of them in CGI. Amazing. So it was like Sage Erickson and Mutaz Barshim and these guys who were like, wow, Andre DeGrasse, where it's like, we actually made them as characters in our story. And they were super excited. Like, they're like, wow, this is cool. Like, I feel like I'm something more than just go, hey, go shoot me in the corner with my glasses on and I'm going to shoot a typical studio shot or outdoor shot or be part of a campaign. They're like, I feel like I'm part of something bigger. And that's the whole point of like opening up the lobby too, of like, I think that's what people are looking for, is that spirit of not just brands of sell this to me of why I should use this product. if I'm going to buy into your brand, I want to feel like I'm part of something bigger than I am to just, I spend a lot of money to buy product from you guys.
No doubt. To me, it feels like a real invigoration of tribe again. And we've discussed this. I discussed this with a lot of the historic Oakley people, is the creation of tribe is so important. And tribe is fundamentally a storytelling thing. It's a group of people that are all buying into the same narrative and moving forward. And you see this in all sorts of, like, it could be just a really specific branded tribe, but in this world, it's such a unique thing. And to have high-end people, high performance athletes and stuff going, I actually really want to have a character.
Yeah.
These people make money, they make tons of money, and they're super excited to get turned into a character within this story, because then it also helps free them to be a little bit more than what they were outside and have the freedom to be able to be a little bit more wacky or a little bit more something, a little extra them.
Well, and it was great for us because it allows them to tell a bigger story about themselves too, where most people just recognize, here's what I do on the slope or on the beach or in the water at this event and things like that. And people don't really get to see into their lives. And so being able to let them come into the brand, let them become a character of our story, we can actually tell their story deeper besides what they just do as their profession. And that's why I think it's like making them feel like they're part of something bigger and letting us showcase them on a bigger platform besides just the sport they participate in.
1,000%. And for everyone out there that doesn't get this, flash to a picture of Dennis Rodman and a picture of Glenn Plake. And these are two really shining examples of someone that came in and embraced the brand, wore the brand, decided to be so bizarre in their own environment with carrying forward that message. It works perfect.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful marketing technique, and they love it because it gives them an extra layer against their persona that, truthfully, out of a story like this, they can make it almost anything they want. They can help write their own story within this in certain realms, which is amazing. You referenced a chapter. In fact, the first chapter existed as, the original 1242 Max Fear Light Inception way back when. Chapter 2 we've seen. We're going to get a glimpse of chapter 3, which is sitting on your screen, and we'll play full screen for everybody. Setting up a multi-year brand narrative is a super bold thing. You're releasing a movie over a fairly broad timeline, and it will come in drips and drabs. Include different characters, athletes, personalities, probably most likely different situations that happen on our beautiful globe. And you're going to be doing this for a while.
Yep. That's the plan.
Yeah. I hope you got a whole stock of Red Bull or something in the back room, because you're going to need it. There's going to be some sleepless nights. Why consider it chapters? Why not consider it just individual books? There seems like...
I guess when we stopped and looked at it, and you start to think about, like, when you start to change narratives every year based upon trend, the consistency goes away. On top of that, you become the mercy of the market.
Right.
And trend. And I think what's important for us is trends are going to come and go. Design languages will change. Color palettes will change. We'll have to adjust to market conditions and things like that. Generation of shoppers, methods will change.
Right.
But at the same time, we wanted to have a long-term vision of the brand and what the story we're telling is. And I think that's a different thing of, yes, the business is important. At the end of the day, we're all here to drive a business and grow it. But at the same time, if we don't solidify the brand, the business isn't going to follow.
Right.
And that's very different. I mean, we've talked about, Oakley actually started out as a business where Jim was selling other people's motorcycle parts.
Sure.
And he didn't want it to be just a business about the money. He wanted it to be a brand.
Right.
And so when you talk about our brand narrative and you talk about the influence of Max Fear Light and 1242, generally ran about 15 years, 20 years that it heavily influenced the way the brand came to life.
From a single
story.
Yeah,
I mean,
incredible.
And it galvanized it. And so when we started thinking about what's the long-term vision of it, and yes, we have technology roadmaps that technology is going to change, or we need to build business changes, or different geographies are becoming different importance in the world. But at our core, I mean, this is the thing where Brene Brown's been a huge inspiration to me. And the story when I started studying a lot of Brene's stuff, it was about, personal development and that emotional intelligence to grow from it about being you to how do you bring people together to be part of something bigger, as I was saying. And so when you think about it, as you study a lot of her stuff, it's like, this is very similar to a brand.
Yeah.
Like when you start out, you're doing it for you, or you're doing it for yourselves in the brand. And then you talk about tribes where it's like, oh, how do you actually get people to become part of this tribe? And then once you get that tribe, people are joining in because they're part of that something bigger. And that doesn't happen in 1 year or 1 season or even 2 seasons at a time. It's a journey. And so what we used was all those stages of personal development to mimic it in the brand to go, wow, we can build out all the way till 2030 of like, what stage is the brand in? What are we actually realizing? And using that narrative to create inspiration. Like the business things are going to come out, the world's going to change,
There'll still be
eco things are going to change
plan somewhere.
And we're going to have to address it.
Yeah.
But when you talk about the narrative, it's like, the way a person develops, whether it's someone in the 1800s, 1900s, 2000s, or whatever, and you look at those stages of development, it's very much psychology of like that journey of a human person developing hasn't changed, even though we're talking about the world now versus the world in the 1400s of whoever going out to explore. And so, it just, back then, people were going out to explore that there was a world out there.
Yeah.
Here we're going out to explore, there's new territories, which may include digital or meta or whatever, or Mars in the future. And so it's just different context of everything, but the personal journey is still the same. The brand journey and evolution can still be the same.
Regulator simplifies the management of fixtures and displays for brands. We provide a seamless solution to allocate, order, ship, track, and manage lifecycle processes from installation to disposal. It's the all-in-one tool that ensures your brand moves smoothly in the market without any bottlenecks. Give us 15 minutes to show you how we will save you time and money. Go to brandregulator.com.
So I was at dinner with a really good friend of mine, my co-host, Pierre, who never shows up. And to me, he is got a really interesting approach on brands and brand development. He was talking about a podcast that he saw where there's a guy who collected a whole bunch of like custom classic Gibson guitars. And the gentleman on the podcast was like, I'm the curator of this collection of guitars and I own them, but these aren't mine. These need to be passed down, and it's my job as the person who is in possession of these at this time to make sure that they go through to the next generation as good or in better condition and perfectly preserved moving forward. And this is a really unique thing because it's a personal development thing as well. And this feeds directly into brand and feeds directly into this is you are a mastered steward and have been for a while of crafting something that future generations, like, will you see the end of this in your lifetime? You might not. If this is a 50 or like if one thing lasted 15 years, you're going to be telling a narrative that goes so long, you may never see the end of this through your career. When you started this process, what were your fears?
Could I actually do it?
Well, you did.
I mean, Secret Recipe last time when we did the podcast, I don't remember how deep we went into the story, but Federico Buffa for Luxottica, who's now the CMO, I mean, he's actually been my biggest advocate through the years on this because he said, Brian, you got to figure out how to put pen to paper on what is Oakley. And, Oakley of the past too. And it was very much, I'll know it when I see it. And it's like, that's not scalable.
It has to be definable.
Yeah. And you can't expect, besides being part of a bigger organization, in general, it's just not a realistic way to operate a global business of I'll know it when I see it. Mm-hmm. And so, at that time, I was like, man, how do you do this? And it actually did take a while of introspection to fuel me, because that's part of the personal journey too, of like, I'm afraid to do this because I'm afraid to fail, but how do I actually overcome that and find the ways to bring it to life?
Right.
And so, it was very daunting. And Secret Recipe, which, Jim reached out to you after Secret Recipe also, the fact that I was able to do that, the next step was, how do you actually put it in context of something to make it scalable? And that was a lot of fuel of Future Genesis. And I think the one thing for people to understand, and you kind of touch upon this, it's a lot of work.
It's a ton of work.
I mean, and the reason being of, our boss, Fetty, pushing this was like, Brian, you're not going to be here forever.
Right.
And not that I want to be here forever, but he's like, you got to set up the next generation. And so this very much goes back to art imitating life, or fiction and, nonfiction, of like this story we're telling actually in Future Genesis is paralleling the brand of like that generation of Colin, Jim. And then, it's funny because people talk about how long I've been at Oakley. And I'm like, man, I remember when I started at Oakley, I was the new guy.
Yeah.
And I used to think back then of like, wow, I mean, now it's like I started in, I got 26 years now. And it was like, I remember coming in going, wow, these guys have been here like 15 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
This company is 25 years old. And now I sit here with my 25-year anniversary ring going, wow, I've been here longer than Scott Bowers, who's been on your podcast too, was just in, and I was talking to him, and I was like, Scott, how long were you at Oakley? And he's like, 25 years. And I'm like, wow, you were my idol when I got here.
Yeah.
And now I'm here in the same amount you were.
Yeah.
And I'm that guy. So it was like Future Genesis, this Secret Recipe is all in an effort to hand off the brand to that next generation of Oakley.
Right.
So they can be like, who is, you talk about the story continuing. When I'm gone, who's going to be the one that picks up that torch and goes, I can write that next piece of the story of what Oakley's going to be.
With how well crafted this, and I've seen versions of this and a little deeper, no one's gonna like, well, you'll need a great storyteller, please. I'm not eroding it, but you're staging it so that it's like something that can be continued. Like the hardest part is always the start. Chapter 1 is a nightmare, and Jim did a great job with chapter 1, but it's been a long time between chapter 1 and chapter 2. It's like a Star Wars gap.
Yeah.
A big gap between 3 and 4. So you guys you have the stage, and I'd love to watch the new video with you. This will be the first time many people are seeing this, which is cool. I'd love to hit play and sort of run through it with you, because I think it's about time that everybody sort of gets a vision of the next chapter.
And he comes.
Dad! Hey, you're back. How is it out there?
It's getting worse. No one should be outside.
Max, I think you're seeing what you want to see. Max. It's not fair to Maxine. To both of them.
They deserve to be safe. In here. I'm building this for all of us.
Yeah, Dad, but I want to
Do you remember how I found you?
I know you never wanted to let me in when I...
You were out there, on your quest, but you would have died without me. It's why I only leave when I have to, and no one comes in. I'm just protecting you.
What they deserve is a future. A future that's real.
It's really interesting because this feels, it's dystopian, but it's more. It's moving forward. What do you consider this? It's not dystopian. What is it?
I think, the vibe you get from the first part is dystopian. As you look at this building, go back to the lobby, very much a journey of the world from dystopian to what is that in the future. And Kevin Kelly, who's the former editor of Wired Magazine, huge inspiration for me on all this. And he talks about protopia. And it's not utopia, because utopia is very much like Brave New World, where it's like no one has an identity.
Yeah.
And that's not what we want it to be, where everything is so clean and perfect that everything's homogenized and no one has an identity. It was this idea about protopia and evolving the world forward. And I think even though the story and the vibe as you get into this is dystopia, the lobby's the perfect example of like, you know, when we were talking about when you used to come into the lobby before, it was very dark and it felt like very much like a mausoleum at times if you were here late.
Never a piece of greenery, which I see in behind me.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, it was like very dark and there was no color in the light. And now it's like, we have all these shades of colors, and the new lobby store has like wood in it and glass, and moving the front door to the front and actually having it glass versus concrete and heavy steel where you couldn't get in. I think that's the idea of Protopian. We get into this story, and I think the most compelling part, like this is telling a teaser to as we go forward into the next journeys of the story. But the whole point of at the end is like you see all these like neurons and neutrons happening in this chemical reaction where it's like life is starting to come back together. And that's the story we want to tell, where, you know, people come into the building and say, oh, it's very Mad Max and, you know, that type of area. And it's like, yeah, Mad Max and those times of the 90s were like, oh yeah, let's envision the fall of humanity and everyone's trying to survive.
Yeah.
And the idea about Protopia is that while the bunker used to be about survival, keep everyone out. No one's allowed in. It was survival and keeping those influences out. The image we want to show with like even that ending scene where there's color and these neutrons are firing. Let's create a vision of hope. You know, it's like dystopia we live every day now, like global pandemic, worlds being, or countries being invaded and political unrest and all these things. Like we're living dystopia on an everyday basis now. How do we create a vision of hope for us in the future?
And as a like brand centrically, that's super cool, especially from something that's been so driven by like a brutalistic style, which trust me, I love. Like everything I design ends up being very much like this. And
we didn't want to walk away from brutalism.
No, it's its own fantastic thing. When I'm watching this, and I didn't pick it up on the first time, and I watched this earlier, Max is like a bit of a torn character in this.
And that's the personal journey part.
Which is really interesting. I'm picking up like he cares, but he's like he's torn on necessarily why he cares. Explain a little bit. Like this is you wrote this. Where, you know, that journey feels like a brand journey to me of what he's expressing. He's like, what am I seeing here?
I think, you know, like you nailed it on the head. And I was talking about Brene Brown earlier when you talk about where Max is in his life. He eventually had a wife, and then he had a kid, and you can see his wife's got another kid on the way. And it's a dichotomy. I mean, both of us as family people, once you have kids, your life changes. And so you start thinking about now, like, where is this going in the world? And where am I going? And this world isn't about me anymore and everything evolving around what I do. It's actually like, I have to think about other people now. And I think Max is, you know, interesting in writing the narrative of him there. He's like, oh, I'm doing this for us. And what he doesn't realize is like, his view of doing it for them is actually him being selfish of like, I'm actually doing this for me. You're safe so you can be with me, and I'm protecting you. Where his wife, Sasha, is saying like, they deserve a future that's real, and they want to go out and live, and living in a bunker is not living, or that may be living to you, which is okay. But just because that's your living to you doesn't mean that's living for everyone. And so how do you start to uncover that? And that's very much the brand too, of like, we were just talking about the lobby, where this used to be like, keep out, you have to know, you have to be in the know. And, you know, the lobby was actually
beyond that, you had to be invited.
And even though the lobby was open to the public, most people didn't even know it existed.
It's wild. It's interesting because in here and in the lobby I'm seeing, and you've already mentioned it, these more natural elements, and Max is obviously, he's pulled up this hologram of a forest and life, and he's like, he's referencing building something. He's building a greener, brighter, happier future for everybody, which now we're finding our protopia. like vision of what he wants to build.
What he thinks is the protopia.
What he believes,
Yeah.
which is, and this is an arguably really sensitive area for everybody. What you believe, what Jim believed, what I believe, what the head people in Italy believe, they're all objective against or subjective.
Yeah.
Like they're from us. You are in the position to get to do this. Max is in his own position here. This is like a super interesting approach, to say the very least, on how to guide a brand. Like I can't think of anybody who has, Apple's done one-off commercials that have had sort of like dramatic feeling things, but there was not really any continuation with these things. This is like a whole thing, and it's not based in reality. It's so happily not. Was this what they wanted? And by them, I mean your bosses.
Well, and that's the thing. In this world of ambiguity and things, basically the briefing was, and go back to how did I take this on? It was basically understanding the problem, like going back to our boss in Milan. And he's like, you have to figure out how to make something that's scalable and teach people what is Oakley. Basically the brief I get. I don't think they have a point of view of like, oh, it's got to be this, this, and this, because they didn't know what that was. And at the time, I didn't know what that was either, of how I was going to actually bring that to life. And so it started going through, I guess that's the personal development side of what I had to go through too, of like, I don't know what they want, but I can't be scared to deliver something. The only thing I can do is not do anything, or can do wrong is not do anything. So I have to show something. And even through Future Genesis, there were a few like conversations about, I don't know if that's right where we want to be or anything, but I had to demonstrate how the tool could be useful, like from a product point of view. And you see Max and Maxine in there, Max represents you and me, of like, we grew up with Oakley when the brand was starting. Maxine represents this next generation of kids who are finding Oakley. Even in product development, it's like, how does this become an alignment tool? Max and Maxine are basically muses for personas for the brand.
Right. That
we go, okay, that product, is that being built for that 50, 60-year-old Max right there?
Right.
Or is that being built for that,
100%.
Gen Z girl right there? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's talking to him, not her. So that's how we were able to like sell this in also, of like, you can use movie making, going back to movie making, of like characters, talking about the athletes. Basically, each character in a movie represents a different persona. Luke Skywalker represents something. Han Solo represents something in Star Wars. And we're basically using this to be a muse of, you nailed it on the head, of science fiction's being used as a platform to create a vision of what we want to make stuff for.
Yeah.
But then when you get down to the basis of like, what product are we making, we can actually leverage the characters in the story to represent the muses, to go, this muse, whether it's and that character in the movie, regardless of whether that's a sci-fi character or a real character, and you look at true archetypes and things like that, their values and motivations are exactly the same. That's why we relate to characters in movies, of like, I relate to Luke Skywalker because he's a farm boy who made nothing and then grew into something, and other people relate to Han Solo because he's like, oh, he's the rebel, he's this cool guy who's got his little leather thing on and whatever. And so that's the same thing of like, even though that guy's like the rebel in a movie, in a sci-fi movie, there's rebels out there in life. Did you make that product for the rebel, or did you make it for Luke Skywalker? And so, it perfectly executes not only, how they dress, but also for, with the work you do in comms. Are you talking to the rebel the right way?
That's 100% it, which is
the tone of voice and all those things.
Yeah, because you can align it and you can pull in all the characters you need to. And more so, this is so inclusive through the whole organization, because design starts thinking about what avatar are we designing for this product, and how do they match into the story? Is it one of the athletes that we're designing this for? If you've got a standout, someone that you want to build around, which you've got tons of standout athletes. I find it really amazing. It's funny, speaking of Star Wars, I'm more of an Indiana Jones guy. So I wrote an article for Entrepreneur Magazine about how marketing works like a bullwhip. And the all the brand equity and the value of the brand exists in the handle of this whip, and the person who's controlling it sends this signal all the way down, and the power of the messaging gets faster and the amplitude of the whip gets higher until it cracks and creates a sonic boom. You guys are putting so much equity in the bank. Oakley's already got a ton of equity as a super valuable brand in market, and how it's earned its equity and gone in and bought it. It's stored it up over years and years, and you're now adding to it, spending some of it and adding to it to create this new narrative. When I talk about the bullwhip, it's about aligning all the different departments. And right now, all the different departments probably don't necessarily understand everything because they haven't seen the entire picture of this. I feel that as this starts going, it starts happening down, you guys are going to end up with a really, really very elegant structure based on the fact that this narrative is the driver. Have you seen the different functional groups, sports marketing, design, sales, trade? Have you seen them starting to understand and see how this is going to affect them downstream?
Yeah, and I don't know if we're quite there yet where fully people know how to activate it. I love the analogy of the bullwhip because I guess the best way I can give back an analogy of how it's becoming tighter is like, just imagine you talk about Indiana Jones and one bullwhip, but if Indiana Jones was holding 10 bullwhips and tried to do it with it, they'd all get tangled.
Yes, 100%.
And that's kind of the way was kind of operating of everyone was their own bullwhip and they were deciding what to do.
Right.
And it just became a tangled thing. And now we're like, at least we've narrowed it down to one bullwhip.
It's amazing.
And even though, you start off of learning how to use a bullwhip, it's like, I don't know how to,
I got a scar on my chin from the first day I picked one up.
Yeah.
Cut myself real good.
And if you were even lucky to do that versus like, I can't even make this thing go. So it's like, I think the bullwhip's a great analogy because it's like, our hope is that as this keeps going, people become better at using that bullwhip where they can be like Indiana Jones, pull something out of someone's hand and bring it back and do it with that much skill. And the hope is the more people who are educated with the bullwhip, the easier it becomes to teach other people how to use the bullwhip versus everyone trying to pick it up from scratch on their own.
Yeah, as an analogy to go to market, which is truthfully what it is, it's a real life one that everyone can just visualize really simply, and understanding that bullwhip's made of actually multiple parts. It's not just one long thing. It's a very elegant, clean structure. Like a brand, hopefully you could bring a brand into alignment. Most people don't understand that every company on the planet, when you dig in deep enough, you see chaos and you see mayhem and you see quick decisions, and we're humans, and logistics fail or COVID happens or all these different things. So nothing in this world is perfect, but the smoother you can get the structure, which truthfully starts at the person holding the whip, is a very key person, but having the value in the handle, the perfect structure and everything done is a really valuable thing. And this, in my opinion, when I look at it, that's why it's such a master class. It's like starting you guys at a point where you can make echoes into the market that last forever. That snap of the bullwhip is going to echo over and over and over. And to me, it's a beautiful thing.
Regulator's Market Check feature not only manages all your marketplace photos through a clear, easy-to-use interface, but also integrates dynamic and field surveys. This allows you to capture real-time market insights directly from the field, enhancing your strategic decisions and ensuring your marketing efforts are both effective and responsive to real-world conditions. Give us 15 minutes to show you how we will save you time and money. Go to brandregulator.com.
Through this, you guys are a multi-channel brand. Apparel, eyewear, snow goggles, prescription eyewear, so forth and so on. If I missed anything, I apologize to any of the product team. How does this lend itself to prescription eyewear? How does this lend itself to these other categories? Maxine's wearing a snow goggle by the looks of things. I see references of little pieces of old M frames intertwined with some really amazing new styled product in here. in this, have you seeded some more Easter eggs of product that's going to come out? Is there things that we'll be seeing in the future? Is this how you guys are going to envision new things?
I think that's a great opportunity we haven't touched upon a lot either. There's another author who's been an inspiration, and just Joanna Hoffman. Okay. There's a design thinking process called speculative futures, and you already touched upon like Star Trek and the Motorola phone and things like that. And basically her whole thing is using science fiction to inspire problem solving.
Right.
And basically go back to envisioning things that haven't happened yet. I'm sure you've said in these meetings before where someone goes, oh, we should make one of these. And there's always someone in the room who's going to go, oh, you can't do that, or the technology doesn't exist. And part of the thing with is like, let's not be constrained by what we do or don't know now. Is if there were no constraints, how would you solve this problem?
That's so Elon Musk of you. It's great.
Yeah, whether that's in the product, or whether that's the use of a product, or whether that's getting around, or a piece of eyewear or goggle or things like that. Oh, I wish my goggles didn't do this. Oh, well, you can't do that because the goggle does this, or the foam has to be there.
Right.
And then, you go, okay, well, if we didn't have that limitation, what would you do? Well, then I could do it. Okay.
Sci-fi lets you do that.
And now that you know that might be solved that way, what do you have, instead of coming up with all the reasons not to do it, let's go research what it would take to actually do this. And there's, especially now with the advancements of technology so rapid, so everyday basis, it's like, wow, there's technology out there that allows you to do that. And that's where using this platform to problem solve also is a huge opportunity to grow the things we do. And on top of that too, where now with AI, I mean, you've seen the Oakley AI products that people are making on their own.
Yeah.
This gives us an opportunity to, I mean, you just walked around the lobby too and saw things you haven't seen before.
Yeah.
Oakley's kind of lost ground because we haven't been putting our stake in the ground of like, let's be the leader of this again. And sometimes we don't show things again because we're like, oh, we can't actually make that though. And it's like the world's passing us by, and other people are claiming IP that we could have been working on. Right. That we were working on too, but because we couldn't make the real product, we don't do anything with it, and then someone else actually makes it, and then it's like, well, we're standing there holding the bag.
Yeah, this cuts you free of those restraints, which is amazing. I see a bunch of wild patents coming down the pipeline with Oakley's name on them at some point, because this is going to let creativity roll, which I absolutely love, because this is what the whole thing's about. Is, there was a quote that came out of Oakley years ago. I know it was Jim. I don't know who it was, but it's that everything can be made better. Yeah. Or everything that's been made can be made better. It's just a matter of who,
when, and by whom. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no reason that it needs to be a new startup. There's no reason for that. It can be the company that's been around for the longest time that blows everyone's mind. I sit and I shudder a little bit, and I don't know where my iPhone went to, but my iPhone 14 Pro or whatever it is now is so close to my original iPhone 1 that I personally find it uninspiring because the design language hasn't changed enough. And I don't know if that's if that's a bug or a feature. Like, is it so good that there is no better alternative, or is it just that everything's been set up so much for that configuration that that's just what we get now? And I find it confusing, to be really honest. And I feel that there's lots of companies that need to break out of that. I brought it up in a podcast. I don't know if it was you or with Colin or who it was, but Elon Musk naturally sits in meetings when they have problem solving sessions on things, and inevitably they want to build something, and the engineering team comes up with a way to produce that product with the equipment and machines known to them right now. And he always, from anecdotally, from what I've heard, goes back to him and says, well, forget that. What's just the best way to arrange the atoms to do this? And we'll figure out afterwards what the best way to do this is. We'll invent the way to do it if we have to. And most people forget, honestly, that that's what brands actually do. Creating something from zero is really hard. It's a very challenging thing. What you built in your new brand foundation is fundamentally a very difficult thing to do. The product that's going to follow this is still fundamentally very difficult to do.
One of the interesting things when we showed Fetty, our boss in Milan, this for the first time with the final cuts of Future Genesis. His first response was like, Brian, I don't ever want to see a commercial piece in here. He's like, this is too good to be gratuitous product placement of like, what's the best seller? Put it in there. It's already the best seller. It's already selling. We don't need to place it in there. This should be your platform for concept car of things you can't make in real life. Don't constrain yourself by putting things in here that you're already thinking like, well, we can't mass produce that, or what's the way to actually be able to mold that? He's like, I want to see stuff in there that's Oakley being Oakley, doing things no one else can do.
Right.
Do what others are afraid to do what others can't do. And now with digital and media that we didn't have before, like back in the 80s and 90s where it was physical product or nothing, now it's like, you have a showcase. We've built a showcase and platform for us to be our concept car that we don't need to, 10% of this may trickle down into a real product, or one day we may be actually able to make the real product. But he's like, I don't want to see things we already make in here. You've already made them. This isn't, I mean, that's the difference between this being a campaign to sell stuff.
Yeah.
I want to see things we can already do and we're already shipping and delivering and selling today. I want to see the things that we don't know how to make in the future.
Yeah, and this stuff makes the wildest stuff that's in market right now look bland, which is amazing. It makes it more palatable. So you can release literally anything. You put over top back in the market. People are like, oh yeah, it makes perfect sense nowadays.
Yeah.
You guys are entering in a really interesting time. You referenced it just a second ago about like, sort of like I am in it. We're doing it right now. We're in an insane ability for creator culture.
Here.
And you referenced it with, one, challenging to build stuff that hasn't already been covered. How's it feel to be like a 10-ton gorilla in the creator culture? Because that's literally what you're doing. Like you're neck deep.
Well, I guess that's what, drives what we're doing forward to keep evolving it and do the next thing. Because, now with AI, anyone can try and make a Oakley product on AI.
Sure.
I mean, our design director, Nick Garfias, and I will work together to go like, okay, anyone can make an Oakley product, but what really is an Oakley product? And that's where secret recipe comes in to kind of filter that out. I think, there we just lost your prop.
Yeah.
But now as you start to get into how do we move forward? So now is like, this was done in CGI, and you even see the evolution of the CGI from the teasers to this one.
For sure. Yeah.
It's constantly that, go back to that everything in the world can and will become better.
Yeah.
Even for us of working on this, we're like, man, how do we take this to the next step better and the next step better? So we don't get back into those times, which you've seen of Oakley too, where it's like getting a little old and stagnant and not evolving. And how do we push the brand forward? And, for whatever reasons are going on. And so I think that's where, being this gorilla and in the midst of it, I constantly want to be challenging all the time of like, okay, we did that part and we got this on board. So what's the next step? We have to do that.
Right.
And for better or worse, I mean, this, we've shared stories about Jim, even as much as some of it is probably him, his personality, but it was also him driving us forward, where when we did have those successes, he didn't congratulate us a lot of times because it was very much like, but what have you done today? That was what you did yesterday. Let's talk about what you've done today.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was to humble us and put us back in our place. But at the same time, it was a driver to understand that we could do better.
Right.
And how do we keep evolving? And, there's another, it was a headline, not as much one of the creeds, but the world is always evolving. We're just tired of waiting.
Yeah, I love that.
And we can't wait for, now's the time we should evolve. We should be constantly driving ourselves to evolve, which is part of the reason for the platform, because we're not like, let's wait and see what happens. Like, it's like, okay, that's done. Let's move on to the next chapter. Evolve where we are. What's the next step? What's the next step? Versus, I mean, we're talking about it with other situations where it's like, you have to keep this pace going. Because if you wait we're going to wait for some results on it.
Sure.
There's going to be a gap there because you waited. And you're not going to be able to follow it up.
And so how does a consumer participate in this in any way right now? Are there touch points for them?
I think that's some of the things we're looking at now too. It's like, I mean, the great thing with any of the platforms of AI or being able to create, or, what's the opportunity of like, you take the nice thing about this is all built in CGI,
Right.
and you start to think about gaming is the obvious thing of like, all the models exist. What can we do with that? Or, how can a consumer actually go enter this world?
Right.
And whether that's participating in it of like, oh, I can actually go visit that world, or I actually can go into a game and play that world, or I can actually go in and model product that I can put into that world, or things like that.
Sure.
Those are all things with this new platform too. It gives us a huge opportunity, talking about being more inclusive and things like that you can go, inclusive of, beyond just opening the building.
Yeah.
You can come visit the headquarters. How about you can be anywhere in the world and you can actually go visit the headquarters and port all this out to,
Well, and you've got your physical manifestation of it here. We're sitting in it, and it's definitively different. Is this something that like you guys have planned in the different divisions of rolling out to retail and altering your retail stores? Will they start evolving in directions directed by Future Genesis?
I think you actually will see like I said, this isn't a one-to-one of Future Genesis of like, make that bunker look like the store. It's actually like, okay, take this, whatever. Are there elements of it that, in this lobby that, the lobby actually has no distinct specific ties of like, ooh, that shelf looks like, I saw that shelf in there, as much as like, oh, now I look at Future Genesis, that this came out after the lobby got done. People go, oh, I get the greenery, the wood, the glass now, and it all starts to make sense. I think you'll start to see that as you hit. I mean, like I said, this was meant to be an alignment tool, and what you should wind up is 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 10 years from now, that you should be able to look back and go, wow, just like we look back fondly at 1992 to the Y2K of like, wow, Oakley, everything felt like it came from the same story.
Right.
The fixtures, the lobby, the comms, through 15 years of comms, even though it evolved graphically in different ways, it all felt like it came from Oakley. So, I mean, 15 years from now, we want people to look back at this era of Oakley and go, wow, everything looked like it came from the same story.
I feel that the story is going to continue, and we're going to have lots of great conversations about this. I could talk to you forever about this. Congratulations. I feel that this is incredible. I can't wait to see the next few things. I can't wait to see some of what I'm seeing in this lobby come to life. Thank you.
Thank you. Always happy to be on Marketeers Clubhouse.
It's a blessing to get an opportunity to come and chat with you guys and sit here and do it, which is my first time out of my own space, which is great. Brian, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Everyone else, we'll catch you on the next episode of Marketeers Clubhouse. Thank you very much.
Thank you.